All right, hello and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about why it's so difficult to learn to live from our feeling and from our intuition and from our capacity to feel through life rather than living fully and completely from our intellect and like thinking about our feelings and thinking about our thoughts and thinking about what our bodies are doing. And also, I kind of want to touch on, if I have time, why it's so difficult for us to learn something on a nervous system level versus learning something intellectually. And so, in the sense of like, a lot of us feel like I know better, right? I intellectually understand what I should be doing. I intellectually understand the teaching. I intellectually understand what would be better for me or what I need or what I want and all of these things, but I can't actually make myself do the thing. I can't actually get myself to follow through with what I know to be true on an intellectual level, physically and in the 3D reality. And why can't I do that? And so this will be kind of a little bit of a double lecture on that. Like I say, that number one feeling of like, why is it so hard to learn to live from feeling? Like, why is it so hard to learn to connect to our feelings and to our bodies and to figure out what our emotions are telling us, or to figure out what our bodies are telling us, or to live from this intelligence that's not just what our logical minds have to say about everything. And so why it's so hard to make that transition and to understand those things and to be able to integrate that understanding into your decision making. And then again, why it can take so long to get to a place where what we know intellectually, we can actually do. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So number one, why is it so difficult for us to learn emotional mastery? Why is it so difficult for us to connect to our emotions? Why is it so difficult for us to get the message from our emotions and to listen to what they're saying and to have that be like a helpful guide for us? Why is it so hard for us to tune into our bodies and to know for ourselves what our bodies are trying to tell us? Why is it so hard to be in a situation in life where we don't know where to go and we don't know what to do, and to tune into ourselves to figure out what our next step is? Because I know that for a lot of us, when I say, right, like tune into your body's intelligence, tune into your intuition, tune into your feeling. When you're lost, when you're confused, when you don't know what you're doing, there's something more than your intellect. Tune into your emotions, tune into your body, tune into your feelings. A lot of people look at me and they're just like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know what my body is telling me. I don't know what my emotions are telling me. I have no idea. When I tune in, there's nothing there. There's just my mind saying all these options that I could take. None of them seem right. None of them seem wrong. I don't know what I should be doing. Or I literally feel like I don't have an option at all and I just need someone to tell me what to do. I need someone to give me the answer because I can't find the answer on my own. And if that's you, if that's what you feel like, if you feel like everything that I'm saying makes sense, right? Like that we should be able to listen to our emotions and we should be able to listen to our bodies, and that there must be something deeper than just our intellectual intelligence, kind of what I was talking about in my last video about intuition. But you feel like you don't have access to it. It feels like when you go inside, there's either just nothing or there's chaos, right? Like there's just a whole bunch of feelings and a whole bunch of mess and a whole bunch of sensation and numbness, and there's stuff going on in your body and all this stuff, and you either think you know what all those things mean and you've acted on that thinking and it hasn't gotten you where you want it to go. So you're saying, when I act on my emotions, when I act on my feelings, when I act on my intuition, it never goes well because I've done that and it doesn't give me the results that I wanted. Or like I say, you go inside and you feel your body and you feel your emotions and you feel all these things and you just are like, but I have no idea what the fuck that means. I don't know what that's telling me to do. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I just want you to know that that's normal. Okay? And this learning to be able to discern what our feelings are telling us, this learning how to actually access the information and the awareness of our bodies and of our emotions and of our something that's greater than just what our intellect can understand and what we've been through and what we already know to this point is difficult work, not because it's actually difficult to connect to these things. Okay? And I really want to plant that seed, that the limiting belief, right, that it's hard to tap into intuition, that it's hard to tap into feeling, that these things are mysterious and they're a totally different, they're like a thing we have to develop, and I'm just like, no, that's not actually true. Okay? The tapping into and tuning into the feeling, okay, I'm going to put a caveat on here, right, is natural for the human being. All children, every child is born with the capacity to feel their emotions and to feel their bodies. And, right, children don't have a developed intellect. Children don't have a developed intellect. They have feeling and sensation. This is actually our first way of navigating the world. It's our first way of knowing what is and isn't right for us. It's our entry point into our interaction with the reality. All of us learned physically before we learned intellectually. So this is not a thing that's foreign to any of us in the sense that we are connecting with it for the first time when we're in our adulthoods. This is always a reconnection to a thing we were born with, the ability to feel and the ability to have emotions. That was literally all we had when we were first brought into the body. Okay? So this is why I say it is normal and it is a natural part of us this is why I say everyone has intuition. Everybody has access to that higher information than just our intellect, because everyone that I'm talking to has a body, has emotions that you were connected to when you were born, and that were your only way of navigating the world before your brain was developed enough to have intellect to even, and before you had experiences enough to know anything intellectually. You had your body, and it was helping you navigate. And so what actually happened, right, is that most of us have learned how to numb this connection. Most of us have learned how to dissociate from our connection, or we've learned to go against it, to ignore it, to just put it to the side because it didn't matter. It wasn't what got us approval. It wasn't what got us acceptance. It got us rejected, all that stuff. We needed to become the intellectual, just do what everyone else is doing and follow the path. And this is what we need to understand, right? Is that the disconnection from our emotions and the disconnection from our bodies and the disconnection from our feeling, the place where intuition and higher understanding and figuring things out we couldn't possibly intellectually know happens. The reason we don't have connection to that is because it was indoctrinated out of us. Okay? We were trained how to shut that down through trauma. The trauma of being rejected, the trauma of not getting our needs met, the trauma of having to be another way in order to be loved and approved of. Because again, remember, when we were children, we could not provide for ourselves. We could not figure things out for ourselves. We were completely dependent upon our caregivers and their love and acceptance of us. And they were our intermediary between us and reality. Our caregivers were the intermediary between us and reality. So we were not having a one-to-one experience with when I do this, this is the reaction. When I have this feeling, this is the thing that makes it feel better. We weren't having that experience. We were having the experience of, I want a thing, I have to get my caregivers to understand me in some way. My actions, my behaviors, my sounds, my expressions have to convince them to get my need met. And that's how I get my needs met, is through someone else doing what makes someone else understand me, and then they meet the need that I have. or not being what they don't want me to be, not doing what they don't want me to do, not straying from the path that gets me approval from them. Because again, we would have felt in our bodies and in our nervous systems that doing anything that gets us disapproved of, doing anything that gets us rejected, means that we're going to die. So we weren't understanding that when we shut down our emotional expression, we don't cry when we're sad, that was hurting us, and that was shutting us down from understanding, okay, well, why was I sad? What happened? What was it that I just went through that either taught me something I didn't already know, or was just a normal human part of being alive and something I needed to learn to process, or I was upset because it was actually harmful and it was something that needed to not be in my life, like it's an alignment thing. We didn't learn that. We just learned crying gets me rejected, so I need to not cry. And so now not crying, not expressing my emotion is how our bodies get programmed that we get safety and that we get our needs met, because then caregivers approve of us again. So we are going against what is truly right for us. We are shutting down our feeling. We are shutting down our connection to something that just happened was normal or was whatever everyone else thinks it was, but it hurt me. And now I have to learn to be okay with that thing and to not express my emotion, to go against what my body is telling me to go against what my emotion is telling me, because it makes caregivers upset when I'm upset. Do you see what I'm saying here? That we learned how to disconnect ourselves from our feelings, from our emotions, because we had to fit in to what our caregivers were saying life was. We had to do the things that our caregivers were telling us to do. We had to not do the things that got us rejected by our caregivers and by society in general. So if what our caregivers wanted us to do went against what we were feeling and what was going on with our emotions, we had to learn to dissociate, disconnect, not listen to our feelings and emotions, because it was more advantageous for us at the time to do what our caregivers wanted us to do, because they were our source for everything, than it was to follow our truth, to follow our emotions, to follow our bodies, and be rejected. Okay, so this is why so many of us feel like we don't have a connection to our intuition. We don't know what our emotions are telling us. We don't know what our bodies are telling us. We always think we know what our emotions are telling us. We think we know what our bodies are telling us. We follow that path. We realize it wasn't it. It gets us bad results. We think our emotions lead us in the wrong direction. We think our emotions are just chaos. We think our bodies are just chaos. We try to figure everything out intellectually, and if it doesn't make sense to us intellectually, we reject it. And then we're like, well, why? Like, why? When you're talking about this emotional intelligence, Allie, when you're talking about these feelings in my body that I'm supposed to know I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you mean. This doesn't make any sense. I can't go inside and find the answers. When I go inside, it's chaos. When I go inside, it's nothing. When I go inside, it's just pain. I don't have an intuition. And I'm telling you, yes, you do. It's just that, again, it all got crossed and our wires got crossed, and we lost that connection of being able to follow through what our emotions were telling us, to be able to follow through with what our bodies were telling us, because that would have made us different. That would have made us stray from being normal. And especially in that time when we were living under our parents' roofs, our caregivers' roofs, whoever our caregivers were, whoever was in control of how we got food and how we got water and how we got shelter and how we got love and how we got acceptance, and these people that were training us, that this is how life is and this is how life works and these are the rules. The training that we needed because we were completely helpless children who didn't know how it worked. Right? The more we had to conform to that, and the more that required that we disconnected from ourselves, the more we're going to learn, or we're going to find in our adulthood, that we don't have a connection, because that connection would have been detrimental to us. So I want to give you an example from my life in that Me and my sister were raised by parents who really did not understand us. And we both had really individual needs and unique needs, and normal just really didn't work for us. Okay? Like, just at the end of the day, I was chronically ill, I was autistic, I was obsessed with God, I was super, super, super highly sensitive, like all filters blown kind of person. So socializing was completely overwhelming for me. I was in a lot of physical pain all the time. My body was like on fire 24/7 for my entire childhood. And I had no capacity to fit in to normal. Like, I couldn't go along. I couldn't be socially normal. I couldn't just be fine like everyone else, okay? And that was like the bottom line for me. And then my sister was also highly sensitive. She was incredibly strong-willed, highly intelligent, highly creative individual who, again, just didn't really fit in with normal kids. She didn't want to just, like, she had a super, super, super active imagination. She was incredibly intelligent, and the normal school system and the normal, this is how you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to function and what you're supposed to do, just didn't really work for her at all. And the way that our caregivers reacted to us and responded to us was, there's something wrong with our kids, right? The big thing was like, you guys aren't normal. You guys are weird. You guys aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're making us look bad, and we don't know what to do with this. So the message was just continually like, stop it. You need to stop embarrassing us. Stop being weird. Stop being different. There was a lot of rejection, just a lot of like, okay, like, you're making our lives worse. You're making us stressed out. You're too much. You're too crazy, your teachers aren't happy with you, you're not socializing normally, you're not just doing all the things, you're too much work for us, you need to be different. And just by the way that I think my sister and I are built differently, I took the path of just kind of like, I can't fit in, I can't change, I was never able to shut off my body and my emotions. This was the big thing. I was not able to disconnect from my emotions or to disconnect from my body. Therefore, I was continually pushing up against what was normal and what was being shown to me as like what I needed to be. I was not socially normal. I was not eating normal. I didn't do anything the way you were supposed to do it, basically. And my sister, on the other hand, really tried. She literally numbed herself from here down to just, so she literally had to like shut off her connection to her body in every single way in order to conform to what everyone around her, so my caregivers and then eventually her social group, forced on her. They were like, you need to be normal. The only way to be accepted and the only way to be good is to be like us. So you need to shut down all of your instincts, shut down all of your feelings, ignore everything that hurts, ignore everything you don't like, ignore everything, whatever, and just fit in. And that's what she did. She literally just like dissociated from herself completely, from her feelings and from her body, and just did whatever was required to fit in. And from that, in our childhoods, she was far more successful, right? She looked at me every single day and was like, I made the right choice to shut myself down because your life is fucking miserable. And it was. My life was fucking miserable. Being someone who refused to conform and who couldn't conform and who was following my feelings and following my emotions and following my body, especially in that time of childhood when I didn't have agency, was horrible. Like my childhood was pure pain because everything that I was being trained to do and everything that was expected of me and everything that was normal hurt. How people related hurt. How people ate hurt. How people watched TV hurt. What people did, what people valued, what people were caring about, what people were doing with their lives. Just literally every way of life that I was taught, this is how we do it, was painful for me. And not being able to shut my emotions down and not being able to just go along with it, so that at least I was liked and at least I was approved of and at least I had friends and at least mom and dad would approve of me, right? If I had at least been able to just shut down and do what I was told, I would have at least gotten the reward of acceptance. But instead of that, I wasn't able to find what was right for me. I wasn't able to figure out what I actually needed. I didn't have the autonomy to create a life that worked for me before I was 21 or had that independence to be able to. Instead, I just was continually upset about everything, continually in pain about everything, continually not conforming and failing and all of these things. And then on top of that, being hated. Literally, my caregivers did not express love. Let's put it that way, right? I was never in a safe environment. I was continually being antagonized by my caregivers, by my friends, by everyone around me, because I was constantly bumping up against what I was supposed to be doing and all of these things because I couldn't do it. But like I say, I wasn't getting good results or finding another way or doing something different because I was a child. And as much as I was straying from the path, right, eating my different diet and exercising and not watching TV and not really participating in the social stuff and not going to parties and not drinking and not having sex and not doing all these things, all it meant was I wasn't doing what everyone else was doing and I wasn't liked. Whereas at least my sister was getting approval. She was getting approval. She was getting liked. She had safe places where at least she wasn't being antagonized. And that is because she learned to shut herself off. She learned to shut off her feelings and shut down. And I think and again, all she ever had to do was look at me and say, it's not worth it. It is absolutely not worth it to do what's true to you. It is absolutely not worth it to constantly be the squeaky wheel. It is not worth it to say you can't do it or you don't want to do it or it doesn't feel good or to express your emotions, because look what that gets you. Nothing. It doesn't get you anything good. There's no alternative. There's no other thing to do. And everyone just hates you. What is the point of that? And I think that is an extreme example of what most of us go through on a daily basis, right? Even as adults now today. Most of us, again, we all went through our childhood of learning how to shut down the parts of ourselves that got rejected, that weren't understood, that our caregivers didn't like, that our friends didn't like, that society didn't like. And those parts of ourselves that we haven't been able to shut down and shut off got shadowed, right? We hate them. We hate the parts of ourselves that feel, that are anxious, that are depressed, that are sick, that can't work a normal job, that can't do normal relationships, that can't get along. We don't see those parts of ourselves as guidance. We don't see those parts of ourselves as good and trying to get us away from a thing that doesn't work for us and trying to guide us towards a thing that does. We see those parts of ourselves as parts that sabotage us, parts that take away our capacity to be happy, and of course take away our capacity to be connected to other people, right? So the guidance that we actually do have, the pain that we have in trying to be normal, which is our intuition, is our guidance for this is what is right for you and this is what is wrong for you. We don't see it as that. We see that as the part of ourselves that, again, gets us rejected, the parts of ourselves that make us fail, and we reject them and we hate them, and then we say, where's my intuition? Well, that's where it is. Right now, it's all the pain you have trying to do what everyone else is doing, right? It's all the pain you have and every part of yourself that you're rejecting as being a bad part of yourself. The addictive parts, the sabotaging parts, the coping parts, the numbing parts, the parts that can't do what everyone else is doing. That is your intuition. That is your guidance. That's your emotional guidance system speaking to you every single day. And the reason you reject it and the reason you don't see it that way is not because there's something wrong with you. It's 100% because you were conditioned to see it that way. You were conditioned to reject it. You were conditioned to see that part of you as bad and as an existential threat to you. Because in your childhood, when you did not have agency, it absolutely was an existential threat for you. And then again, most of us in our adulthoods have not learned that, okay, now I'm an adult. Now I can be rejected. Now I can take risks. Now I can try things. Now I can fail. Now I can do all this stuff and still figure it out. I can still be okay. I have agency now. I can take a step. It can be a fail, it can be a success, and I can just figure out what I learned from it and then take another step. We don't feel that way as adults, right? Most of us as adults feel like, I don't know what the whole path is. I don't know if I take this step, if I'm going to be able to figure it out, or if I take this step, if it goes wrong, what do I do? And we feel completely trapped in this feeling that, like, if we get rejected and if society doesn't like us and if we're not seen as normal and if we upset the people around us and all that stuff, our world is going to end. And again, we don't have that inner sense that we can take steps, and it can be challenging and it can be hard and we can not be sure and we can make mistakes and we don't feel like we can recover, right? So many of us are so afraid. So, like, this is the thing, like, we start to connect with our emotions, we start to connect with our bodies, and we start to say, okay, well, this hurts and this hurts and this hurts, so maybe I want to try this, maybe I want to do this, maybe I want to go in this direction, and that's what we're feeling like our intuition or our guidance is telling us. And then we're way too afraid to take that step because we think, but what if it goes wrong? Or what if I can't support myself? Or what if I really hurt myself? Or what if it doesn't work out? What if it's not the right step? Because we don't have that inner sense of, like, then I'll figure it out. I'll take the step. If it's a fail, I'll figure it out. I've figured it out before. If it goes wrong, if it hurts, I'll learn from it and I'll figure it out and then I'll take another step. We don't feel that way, right? We feel like, again, either there's nothing inside, we feel like there's just nothing in there, or we feel like the guidance that we're getting is completely impossible to follow because, like, what the hell is that going to do? Get me rejected? It's a huge risk. I might hurt myself and then I'll suffer forever, right? A lot of us really feel like if we make a mistake or if we do a thing, that's it. That'll be it. We'll never figure it out. We'll never do it again. We'll never get out of it. We won't be able to support ourselves. And again, right, because we've never learned how to learn one step at a time. We never learned how to follow that intuition one step at a time. We never learned how to follow our feelings one step at a time. We never learned how to fail and figure it out. We just learned that we're going to get rejected. A mistake is the worst thing that could ever happen. And that's it, right? And so we really need to have compassion for ourselves. That connecting to our bodies and connecting to our feelings and connecting to our intuition is really challenging, not because it's not a natural part of us, but because we were literally trained not to trust these things, not to listen to these things. We were trained that the only way to be safe, the only way to be successful. So again, right, that voice in your head that says, if I take that step and it's a fail, I'll die, I'll suffer forever, I'll never be able to figure it out. That fear that stops you from listening to your intuition when you do have that guidance is a protective mechanism, but it's not true, right? We really feel like we're going to take a step, and if it doesn't go well, that we will suffer forever. But that is not reality. That is your body trying to keep you from taking the step that in your childhood would have been a huge existential threat to you. That's why it feels like we're going to die when we consider taking a step outside of what we've normally done. Because to our bodies, that step of following our truth, following what's real for us, to our bodies are like, no, because that'll get you rejected. That's outside of what your caregivers taught you. That's what outside of what society taught you. And in your childhood, when you were learning how reality worked, that meant you would die. So that's why now in your adulthood, you feel like you're going to die when you're going to follow your intuition. You feel like you're going to die when you're going to follow your feelings. Because your body is literally saying, in childhood, I would have died. So now it feels like the same thing. And it's a mind game, right? So sometimes, like, people often ask me, like, so what was it that made it so that you were able to follow your emotions and follow your feelings and create this whole new life for yourself that wasn't normal? And how did you figure it out? And how did you figure out your steps and all of these things? And like, I think the first answer that I have to give there is I got really used to and really comfortable with taking the step that made me feel like I was going to die. Like, literally, it came down to, I often just sat there and said, okay, what is more painful? Staying where I am and doing this over and over again and having the pain that at least is predictable, and I know how to navigate this pain, and I know how to cope with it, and I know what my patterns are, and I know what I'm going to do and all of that stuff. Or taking the step, taking the risk, and maybe it will be a fail. Because that was the thing, right? Like, again, I think a lot of us really think that when we're connected to our intuition and we're connected to our guidance and we're connected to our emotions, that means that all the steps we're going to take are going to feel exciting and are going to feel fun, and that they're always going to lead us to something immediately better. And I just think that that's not true, purely based on my experience. That a lot of the time, like me following my guidance out of where I was, the reality was, and this is my metaphor for it, I was like $1 million in debt, right? The way that I was raised and how I was conditioned to be and what was shown to me as normal was all so not right for me. It was all so the opposite of what I needed to feel good in life. That any step I took from the debt I was in, from how far away, we can think of it that way, how far away I was from the life that was actually going to work for me. Because if we think of it that way, right? Like, the life I was born into, born and raised in Alberta, beef capital of the world, oil industry capital of Canada, Christian, like, in all the ways that totally fucked me up, which I'm still learning about how badly that was bad for me. Normal education system, like, literally all my friends cared about were boys and sex and drugs and celebrities, and like, it was cold all the time, like there was no food. I was literally allergic to absolutely everything that we ate. Like, learning now that, like, literally I don't think there could have been a more opposite to what I needed and what I wanted life than the life I was born into. That for the first few years of taking steps and following my feelings and following my intuition, and once I finally got some autonomy in my life, I didn't step into bliss. I didn't step into easy, good steps that just worked out. It was like a lot of struggle. And there was a lot of steps that I took that I was like, this is going to be great. And it was horrible. and I made big mistakes, seemingly, right? I didn't know about visas. We went to rent an apartment and we didn't translate and understand. And then we almost got, like, right? There were so many things that happened that, like, cost me money I didn't really have, and that were like, and learning to say no to things, like quitting jobs and then going and working another lower wage job instead of being on salary at the store I was at before, and like all of these things, like following my intuition. It was a long time of steps that were scary and that didn't even work out that good. But now looking back, I can see were totally how I was gonna get out of that. Like they were my steps out of debt, right? And so I was paying $10, paying $100, paying $200 into my account, and that didn't take me into the positive. That didn't take me into like clarity and I'm above ground now and I can see where I'm going and I can see what I'm doing. It was all just like, well, I don't know. I'm just going to keep following and I'm going to keep trying and I'm going to keep learning. And I kept failing and things kept not going how I was going to go. But I just refused to give up and I refused to not listen to my body and I refused to not listen to my emotions. And it was incredibly overwhelming and incredibly painful for a very long time. And scary. But at the same time, things were getting better and better and better overall. Right? This is the other part of it, is that I couldn't focus on, did that take all my pain away? And did that make everything better? Did the step that I just take fix everything? Because if I had leaned on that, I would have given up. Because absolutely no step that I took away all my pain. No step that I took fixed everything. It was, did it make it a little bit better? Did it give me a little bit of clarity? Did it give me a little bit more information about what I am and what I need and what's going on and how life works that I didn't have before? And if it had done that, that was good enough. Okay? And I just kept trusting my body and trusting my emotions that if something hurt, if something felt like shit, it wasn't right. And even if the next 3 things, 4 things, 5 things I tried also felt like shit, I was like, good, okay, that's not it. That's not the step. That's not the thing. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try this other thing. And so, like, again, why do we feel so disconnected from our bodies and because? Number 1, when most of us connect to our bodies and most of us connect to our intuition and our feelings, the first thing that happens is chaos. It's just a bunch of feeling and a bunch of pain and a bunch of stuff we don't understand what it is. And we think, forget it. Or there is no wisdom in here. It's just chaos. Or it's just numbness. Or it's just a whole bunch of feeling and it's all pain and I don't know what any of it means and none of it is helpful. So that's the first thing, right? When we first open that email inbox, we haven't been checking for however long it was since we've shut down our emotions and our feelings in our childhoods. It's just going to be all these overwhelming emails. Okay? Second thing, we're going to realize we're in debt. That the things that our emotions and our bodies are telling us to do aren't going to take us into bliss right away. Aren't going to take us into pleasure right away. Aren't going to take us into clarity right away. We're going to have to take a whole bunch of different steps that are informative and that let us know things and that teach us what we need to know on the way to what we want, but aren't it. And I think a lot of us have a really hard time with that, with the idea that our intuition and our feelings lead us to things that aren't the ultimate answer and that also hurt and that also suck. Because the bottom line is we were cut off from our learning journey when we were cut off from our feelings and when we were cut off from our bodies. We were cut off from the path of figuring things out as we go. So now we have to figure things out as we go. And then the third thing is that it's not going to make logical sense. We're going to have to do a bunch of things that don't make sense to our intellect. And we've been trained and indoctrinated our entire lives to believe that what the intellect sees and knows and can understand is it. And if it doesn't make sense to the intellect, that it's wrong. Right? That if we can't make it make sense, that it's wrong. Don't do it. And if it does make sense to the intellect, it is right, no matter how painful it is. And learning how to go against what seems logical to us. So again, it's not about being like completely flippant and totally ignoring your brain and not using your logic at all. It's about saying, okay, the step that logic is telling me to take feels shitty. Like it just feels awful. And I can't make any way of taking that step feel good. And we learn how to just say, okay, I'm going to wait and not take that step. And that's going to feel horrible, and it's going to feel scary, and it's going to not feel good. But we have to train ourselves to say, okay, the intellect is convinced, but the body knows something else. So I'm just going to wait. And it's not to say that we aren't going to take that step at some point. It's not to say that that step was totally wrong. It's just to say that's not the step right now. We need to be with ourselves for a bit. We're just going to feel and see what happens when we don't do a thing that feels terrible in the moment. Or, like I say, we're going to have that thing of like, this thing just feels really exciting. My body is very attracted to this step. And again, that doesn't always mean that it's the right step. That doesn't always mean that it's the perfect thing for us. That doesn't always mean that it's not our trauma leading us. Rather, we want to say, okay, this is the step that feels good to my body, what I think feels like pleasure right now. I'm going to take it, but I'm going to observe what actually happens. Right? Is there a good overall effect? Do I learn something? Was it from a place of addiction? Was it from a place of coping and numbing and being normal and consensus reality approval versus actual pleasure? Right? And we can tell the difference between real pain and consensus reality pain and real pleasure and consensus reality pleasure by the results we get. Right? If the negative results we get is people got upset with us, but the overarching result for ourselves, other than people's opinions and people whatever, was good, like it made us feel good, it gave us something good in our lives, we know that that was true pleasure. If it gives us pain, right, a bad result, but people accept us, so there's pleasure, people liked us, it went along with our conditioning, but there's some long-term negative effect, like in real reality, that's how we can tell that was consensus reality pleasure. You see, we start to be able to discern what was my real feeling guiding me based on what the actual result was and the long-term results I got from that in taking me towards the life that actually I want to live versus how did other people react and respond. Okay? And then the last thing is we then have to learn to trust ourselves, to take steps and figure things out. And that's the hardest step of all, right? Is learning that when we're really following our guidance, we are going outside of the norm. We are going to start to have these lives that don't look like everyone else's lives. And we start to realize we don't have mentors to look to and a normal path of how this usually goes. And we don't have that guidance of other people approving of us or saying this is how this goes or this is what's going to happen, because our path is different. And we have to be strong enough and we have to learn that resilience of trusting in ourselves that even if we make a mistake or even if we take a step and that's not it, that we don't see that as a failure and we don't see that as, well, now I'm fucked forever. Because literally the chances that we're going to make a choice that actually fuck us forever is slim to none in this life. Like, most of us are not in a position where the next step we're going to take could possibly ruin us forever. Most of us could take a step and it'll be a risk and it'll be scary and it could be bad for a little bit, but we'll learn from it and we'll figure it out. And we have to start to develop, like I say, that trust in self to take the step anyway, even though it kind of feels like we're going to die, even though it kind of feels like if this goes wrong, I won't be able to be okay. And the more we do it, the more we prove to ourselves that we can. Because most of us are so much more capable and so much more able to figure things out than we think we are. And we're not going to be able to see that until we take the step. Like, sometimes we just have to jump in, and that's when we'll show ourselves how we can do it. That's when we're going to figure it out, when we have to, and not before. So we have to take the step. So you see, and then again, the last thing being, for most of us, when we really start to live the lives that we're supposed to be living, as in that are right for us, we are going to upset people. We are going to lose people. People are going to disapprove of us. Like our worst nightmares are going to come true, that those people we have been so codependent with and so trying to not disappoint are going to be disappointed with us. Okay? And then on top of that, even if we don't feel like society is judging us or we're losing people or anything like that, our nervous systems are going to be freaking out when we go against our conditioning. When we do things that are not what we were trained to do, when we don't do things that are what we were trained to do, when we start to listen to what hurts and actually follow that, our bodies are going to flip. And we need to be prepared for that, right? And that's why we have these tools of compassion and curiosity and being on our own side and generating that inner safety when everything feels like chaos, of orienting. Where am I? What am I doing? What's just my next step? Right? When our minds are starting to freak out and like, oh my God, this is going to mean this, and this is going to mean this, and this is going to mean this, and I'm going to fall apart, and all of these things. We have to be able to bring ourselves back. We have to be able to say, okay, what's my one next step? Where am I? What's actually happening right now? Is all of that scary stuff actually happening? Or am I just afraid it's going to happen? Right? When I took that step, did I actually die? Did I actually become homeless? Did I actually lose everything? Or am I just afraid that that's what's going to happen? But what is actually happening right now, right? Like that's why these self-love principles are the foundation for being able to take these steps eventually. Because we need to be able to learn to hold ourselves through these challenging things, right? That's why we learn to create that nervous system safety. Not so that we can have nervous system safety and composure at all times, because that's not how life works. It's so that we can be resilient for taking steps that are actually true for us. And working through the anxiety and working through the fear and working through going through those periods of time where you literally have no idea what you're doing. You're just following and hoping it's going to go okay. And you're just learning from your steps, right? And I think that's the last thing, is being able to learn from the steps that you take versus seeing anything as good or bad or right or wrong or fail or not fail. You start to see every step as information. Every step as just a step. None of the steps are the ultimate step. None of the steps are going to ruin you. None of the steps are going to take you to where you want to go 100%. It's just going to be a bunch of little steps where you listen to your body, you listen to your emotion, you follow what you think it was telling you, and then you assess afterwards. Did it actually go the way I thought it was going to go? If not, what did I learn? What did I learn about myself, and what did I learn about reality? When I have this feeling, this is what I think it means, so when I act on that, did I get those results? And if not, time to question what I think the feeling means. Reality is telling me something different. You see what I'm saying? So this is why so many of us are disconnected. And then that last thing of why does it take so long for us to be able to actually do these things in real life? Because again, we are not intellectual only beings. We learned our conditioning. We learned our right and wrong. We learned what is and isn't going to lead to death in our bodies. The ways that we are coping with life right now, the ways we're addicted, the patterns that we're in, those aren't just intellectual things that are happening because we're not strong enough or we're not on top of ourselves enough or we're not trying hard enough. Okay? Those are the patterns that we're in that our bodies think we have to do in order to survive. Those are the patterns that we're in that our body just does over and over and over again, that our mind does over and over and over again when we're triggered into not feeling safe, which most of us are triggered into not feeling safe all the time. Right? Remember the way that our society is set up, that the way that capitalism runs is on insecurity, insufficiency, the idea that things are scarce, the in-group and the out-group. We are constantly, every single minute of every single day, having our nervous system triggered by our society. You're not good enough, you're not acceptable enough, you're not safe, right? You don't have enough money. You're not going to be able to be okay. All of these things are being sold to us 24/7 because that's what keeps us good people who stay in the system. It keeps us from questioning things. It keeps us from doing anything different. It keeps us trapped in our constant codependency with everyone and everything. Because we're constantly triggered into feeling unsafe, which then, when we're in that trigger of feeling unsafe, our bodies and our nervous systems take over and say, we're just going to go into that state of doing what we've always done. When we're totally triggered and totally unsafe feeling, all our bodies want to do is what we've always done. Our minds will be convinced to do what we've always done, and we will rework it however we need to rework it to convince ourselves that we're doing something different. It will feel like we're doing something different. It will feel like we're doing the right thing from how we think and interpret our feelings in this moment. Because that's what the body thinks is going to keep us safe. Right? If we really understand how our nervous systems are being activated 24/7 by our culture, and how that activation affects us by pushing us to do what we've always done, we can start to understand why so many of us have a hard time changing or doing something different. Because again, your body thinks you're going to die if you do. And why so many of us feel like we're going to die when we think about doing something different. Because yeah, that's what your body is going to tell you. That's what your mind is going to tell you. Because that was survival. Fit in. Do what you need to do. Do what you did last time. Because whatever you did last time, you're still alive. Clearly, that's the answer. That's how our nervous systems work. So learning how to be our inner safety, how to generate a little bit of that nervous system regularity within all of this, helps you to start to say, okay, this normal thing feels like shit. This way that I've always done it, it hurts. My emotions are not on board for this. So how can I question that? What if normal isn't right? What if it's not something wrong with me? That's your first step. That's why compassion and curiosity are the first steps. Because when you first get into this again, you're going to start to notice you have pain, you have resistance, you don't want to do things don't feel good, and your automatic reaction to that is going to be to blame yourself, to shame yourself, to think there's something wrong with you. So much so that most of us don't even recognize it. The second we start to feel pain, we miss somebody, we want something, we don't want to do something, we immediately, how is this my fault? What am I doing wrong? I need to do this thing, because if I don't do this thing, I won't have money. I won't be successful. I'm lazy. I'm stupid. I'm broken. I'm not good enough. Why are we disconnected from our feelings? Because when we connect to our feelings, we feel all the ways we don't want to align with society. We don't want to do what's normal. Things hurt, and we immediately go into self-blame. Right? We don't go into, does this hurt because it's not true? Does this hurt because it's not the way? Does this hurt because society is wrong? We immediately blame ourselves because that's what we had to do in childhood to survive. Right? We couldn't doubt our caregivers. We couldn't doubt the people that we depended on for absolutely everything who were teaching us what reality was. We had to doubt ourselves. We had to reject ourselves. We had to assume we were shitty and we were broken and there was something wrong with us so that we would conform and therefore survive. So now in adulthood, we have to totally rewire that. When we have shame and guilt and we think, this hurts because I suck, or I can't do this because I suck, or I feel this emotion because I'm weak, or I'm this, or I'm that. That's not what's really going on. Your body's trying to save you, right? That shame and that guilt, that inner critic is, again, it's a good part of you. It's trying to keep you in alignment with what it thinks you have to do and you have to be in order to survive. So that's why you can intellectually understand this thing hurts and I don't want to do it and I want to be different. But the second you try to change, your body goes, hell no. You change, we die. Fuck that. No way. I'm not going to let you do it. So we have to create that inner safety. We have to start taking steps and seeing how it goes, learning how to orient instead of going into our fear brain and making up all these stories about what happened. Because that's what a lot of us do, right? We take a step, it was really scary, and then we literally think we became homeless and lost our jobs and didn't have money and now we're dead. When absolutely none of that actually happened. We take a little step. We have to learn to start trusting ourselves. And like I say, we have to learn to start questioning those shame and guilt stories. Because most of us, again, when we start to connect with our feelings, maybe we'll connect with our feelings. So if we get past phase 1 where it's all chaos and mess and pain and we just don't even want to look at it, we say, okay, no, I'm going to keep looking at it. The next step that's going to come is shame and guilt. There's something wrong with you for all of these feelings. So we have to get through all of that. We have to start to question those stories. What if that's not true? And then after that, we have to start taking steps. And then what's going to happen? We're going to get rejected. We're going to fall flat on our face. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to have to learn things we don't know yet. We're going to have to figure it out as we go. We're going to lose that map of normal and have to figure it out ourselves. So you see why it's so hard to learn to live this way. And again, a lot of us can think and hear that living from feeling means you don't think about things and you don't use logic, and that is not true. It's that we start to become emotionally intelligent, where we have our feelings, we have our intuitions, we have our emotions, and we start to learn what these things mean through repetition. Right? Because a lot of us think, okay, well, this feeling means this, so I'm going to do this. But the result isn't good. So we start to learn, okay, well, I'm misinterpreting that feeling. We start to learn how to say, okay, this is what my feeling wants me to do. So how do I logically figure out a way of doing that? One step. Right? And then that last part of your life of following your intuition means you're not going to have the whole path. You're never going to see the whole plan. You're never going to have it's going to work out and it's going to be fine and here's how it's going to go. It's going to be a life of constantly having to say, I'm going to take the step and see what happens. I'm going to learn to catch myself. I'm going to learn to figure it out as I go. At no point did my life become this clear thing where the next 10 steps were available and I knew how all of them were going to go. I figured out my way of life one step at a time, falling on my face, seeing what happened, taking that, using that as information for my next step, figuring out what felt the best, doing that. Went well, great, okay, which led to the next step, which led to the next step, and it's just one step at a time. Being rejected, being misunderstood, being told I'm shitty and I'm failing a lot, being a failure. This is all a big part of it. So this is why it's so hard to live from feeling. Because the world has trained us out of it. In order to fit into normal, you cannot be connected to your humanity. That is basically the bottom line of it. Not all things, right? Not all things in society are horrible and wrong, but so much of it. We are in pain, we don't know what we want, we're coping and numbing and distracting because living normal life hurts. So when we start to connect in, it's just a bunch of pain and a bunch of chaos that we don't understand, right? And then when we start to lean into it, it just leads to a bunch of shame and guilt. And we think we suck and we're failing and we're not doing it right. And the reason we feel this way is because of ourselves and all of that stuff. And we have to work through that. And we have to learn to regulate our nervous systems. And we have to learn those tools so that we can start to take steps and then get rejected and have those steps not work out and have it be chaotic and messy and we make a mess and look like failures, and people look at us and say, I see, this is why we stay on the normal path, because going different just looks worse. It's chaotic, it's crazy. And then eventually we just say, I'm going to learn from every one of my steps. I'm going to take everything that I'm doing and I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to love myself, and I'm going to regulate my nervous system, and I'm going to learn my capacity to take steps, because again, sometimes we can't. Sometimes we need to just admit, my nervous system is not okay with taking the step. I cannot take the step. It's too scary. I need to stay where I am. That's okay. We're not always ready to take the step. We're not always ready to do the thing. And that's totally fine. It all just comes down to, sometimes we just have to ask ourselves, what's worse? Staying where I am and staying in this pain that is predictable, or taking the step and taking the risk and having to figure it out as I go. And then we start to be able to take these steps more and more and more, because we start to see that no step, almost never, are we going to take a step that's going to fuck us forever. Never are we going to take a step that's going to be the thing that takes us to bliss. We're just going to learn how to figure things out as we go, life being a mix of pain and pleasure. We're going to learn all these things, like I say, like, right? This isn't an exhaustive, this is how you do this. My point of this video is to say there's nothing wrong with you if you feel like connecting to your feelings is really hard. Because these are the things that are in your way of that. And learning how to reconnect is like, right, like when we have a limb that's asleep and the circulation starts to come back, it doesn't feel good at first. It's very painful. And then learning how to reuse that limb is hard, because it's like kind of weird and floppy and weak. Like if something was in a cast for a while, like literally atrophied, building the strength back into that thing, that muscle, learning how to use it again, it's hard. So that's part of what this is. Okay? So there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Shame and guilt are always lies. Your feelings are telling you things. You are connected to your intuition. You are connected to your body. And reconnecting might just be painful. So that's the other thing. Don't rush this. Don't force trying to feel. Don't force it. There's only so much our nervous system can handle at one time. So if it's super overwhelming for you to feel, do it for 5 minutes a day. Get a therapist. Do it with someone so you're in a safe container. You're not doing it by yourself. Get someone to help you co-regulate for a while before you learn to start to regulate yourself. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking for help. There's nothing wrong. Sometimes we need that. Okay, again, right? I'm not up here saying self-love is the thing that will work for everyone at every phase. Sometimes we need support from the outside before we will be able to love ourselves. Sometimes these videos can be enough of that, right? Like just me helping you walk through these things. Go to my Instagram profile with the start here. Go to my video of how to orient. And like having someone do it with you, even if it's virtually like this, can be of help. Learning to regulate, learning to stop blaming yourself. Hopefully my videos will help you do that too. That will be how we start to reconnect with feeling and start to live from feeling. And then again, understanding that it's just, a lot of the time it's going to feel like we're going to die. Like that's how we kind of know we're doing it. And we have to do it anyways. So that's why we work our nervous systems. Right? And I can tell you, I was a really traumatized nervous system. So it can be done. When you're used to being totally fried out and not supported and no one loving you and all that stuff. Like I've been there too. I know what that's like, and I hope that that's not your situation, and I would never wish that on anyone else, and this is why I do this, because I never want anyone else to be alone the way that I was alone. And so if that is you, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You can do it. I promise you. You are capable. There is nothing wrong with you. Not being able to do normal life, feeling like shit all the time in normal life, feeling totally scared to do something else because it feels like you're going to die and all that stuff, there's nothing wrong with you. 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 And if you're not able to take the step and you don't want to do it, that is okay. If just finding safety as much as you can is what you need to do, do that. There's nothing wrong with you. Okay, this world has traumatized us, and some of us aren't ever going to be able to follow our intuition, maybe. And that's not a failure. There is no failure. You cannot fail. There's nothing wrong with you. You're doing the best you can. Okay, and I just want you to know I see you, I believe in you. It is not your fault you're disconnected from your emotions. It is very hard to reconnect. And hopefully these videos just slowly over time are encouragement to just slowly over time start to feel a little bit, start to be on your own side a little bit, start to trust in yourself a little bit, start to see yourself through things just a little bit. Because that's how we build it. Just a little bit of those things at a time. The world trained you to disconnect. You had to disconnect because following normal is really painful. And coming back to yourself and then learning how to go a different way can also be really painful. So go slow. Be gentle with yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. Don't force this. Do not force this work. Okay? Get help where you need help. Get support where you need support. And if you can't, follow these videos. Follow other people who are doing this, who can at least be virtual support, right? My stories every day, I try and just do a little, I'm here with you, you're not alone. Okay? That's all. It's not your fault. Reconnecting is difficult. That pain is your guidance. So it's not your fault. Let's listen to it. Why are you actually in pain? What actually hurts? Maybe you're right. What if that? Okay? I love you. You are the best. I'll see you next week. Trust yourself. There's nothing wrong with you. Your pain is not your fault. Okay? Mwah. See you later.